Well, welcome back to The Plank presented by Ram. I'm Tom Korn along with John Sable. And this is one of my favorite parts of the show.
Yes.
Especially today because we have a birthday boy.
We do, yes. Our own fantasy expert, Matt McGuire. Now, Matt, your birthday's today, but the question is, did you get yourself a birthday present and a fantasy football win here in Week 3?
Well, we'll find out a little bit more about that later this afternoon. I got Aaron Rodgers still to play. All I need is 8 points, so I'd like to think I got to win this week, but you never know what's going to happen. And speaking of fantasy football, we've got another week in the books here. And, as we go through the season, we're getting more and more ideas about who are some of the consistent contributors week in and week out. That waiver wire is starting to get pretty thin, so you got to start looking towards matchups. Who's really good against the run, what defenses give up a lot of yards to running backs. Look at those trends, and you also want to keep an eye on injuries. And speaking of those injuries, we had another key injury at quarterback this week. It was Tony Romo last week. This week, Ben Roethlisberger went down. So if you look at last week, I mentioned Derek Carr, somebody you want to pick up. If you missed out on Carr, you want to look at Andy Dalton this week. He had a huge week in Week 3. He had 383 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's a fifth-year starter, but he often gets overlooked when it comes to fantasy football. He's only owned in about 50% of the leagues, but when you look at the numbers, he's got the 5th most passing yards in the NFL, and he's got the 2nd most touchdowns so far this season. Another reason why I like Andy Dalton, he gets to throw the ball to A.J. Green. A.J. Green's one of the most explosive wide receivers in the league, and obviously A.J. Green's owned. But if you need wide receiver, you might want to look at a guy like Marvin Jones, who's the number 2 wide receiver there in Cincinnati. And A.J. Green gets a lot of the attention from the defenses. Marvin Jones' production's been going up each week. This week he had 5 catches for 94 yards and a touchdown. Now that he's further up that depth chart and he's really the number 2 wide receiver, I expect some consistent production from him going forward. Now, speaking of depth charts, the next guy I want to talk about is Carlos Williams. He's a rookie running back from Florida State, and he had a huge week in Week 3, 12 carries, 110 yards, and a touchdown. That's now 3 straight weeks with a touchdown for the rookie out of Florida State. But he is the running back there in Buffalo, and we all know that the Bills made a big trade this offseason to bring in LaShawn McCoy. Now, McCoy's still their number 1 guy, but he's got a hamstring injury that's been lingering. And those hamstring injuries have a tendency of not going away as the season goes on. And if you look at McCoy's production, Week 1 he had 17 carries. Week 2 he dropped down to 15 carries. And last week he had 11 carries. So keep an eye on that situation and see if McCoy's injury is still bothering him. If it is, Carlos Williams is a good guy to pick up. Now, the last guy I want to talk about, he's going to be a name familiar to a lot of Bucs fans. And, people really high on him right now. He's owned in over 80% of the leagues. He had a huge week last week, but he's somebody I think we should stay away from for right now. And I have a very specific reason coming up in just a second, but it has something to do with what I call box score scouting. That's when you look at the scores at the end of the day and you say, wow, LeGarrette Blount, 78 yards, 3 touchdowns. But what you don't realize is all that production came in the second half of the game. That game was a 51-17 blowout and really wasn't in much question. So Dion Lewis is still the main running back for the New England Patriots. And, LeGarrette can get a couple carries around the goal line and get a couple touchdowns, but I think Dion Lewis is the man going forward there in New England. He's more of a pass-friendly running back coming out of the backfield. And the reason why I think that's important, I think Tom Brady's on a mission this season. He had the whole Deflategate thing. He's on pace right now to set an NFL passing record. Granted, we're just 3 weeks in, but I still like Dion Lewis there. So that's all I've got for this week. Let's go back to Tom and John, guys. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you, Matt, and happy birthday to you, big boy.
Hopefully Aaron Rodgers gets you the points. I have him on my team tonight, so I know he will, hopefully. Hopefully. All right, we have a phone call here. This is, I believe, our weekly number 1 fan, Jim from Newport. Richie, Jim, how are you feeling this morning, well, now this afternoon, after yesterday's debacle in Houston?
A little crunchy, guys, let me tell you. First off, walking the planks, unfortunately, got to be the kicker. To miss those kicks after hitting a big 58-yarder, boys got to look in the mirror and do a little thinking. Another big thing is what happened to Doug Martin? All of a sudden it seems like especially the second half of the game they went to Sims, and granted he great run on that screen pass for the touchdown, but
I think first of all, Jimmy, thank you for the call. Sims, I thought, did a good job. Mm-hmm. He's probably one of the bright spots. They got a 3-headed horse back there, and that's what they're going with. And Martin was as effective as they wanted to. Hopefully that will certainly change.
Still at 14 carries
against Carolina.
14 carries for only 46 yards. That just you're getting the ball that many times. You got to get some more yards than that. Now, that's not all Doug's fault, but still, I mean, they're using him just to no efficiency.
Right. All right, we're going to take a short break. We're going to come right back. We're going to show you who is going to walk the plank, so stay tuned as the plank continues right after this.